The one mind. We have evidence of the control of the one mind. In every field of action, we will note the one mind control. Even upon this boat, you will note that there is one head. Consequently, there is one control, with many activities under that control, and all these lesser activities emanate from that centralized authority. It is only through this centralization of power and authority that there is anything like harmony in the operations of any organized section of society, or even within the individual. We all know what happens when there is a division of power, or rather, an attempt to divide authority without consideration of some central motivating source. The orders which go forth from two sources to the various centers of activity can result only in confusion and chaos. If power emanates from more than one central directive head, the authority is destroyed and the entire structure is broken down. When there is one controlling element which has dominion, power, or control of motivating action, we are brought directly to that one element and thereby brought to one pointed action, which we have discussed before many times. It is through that action that we do accomplish, and that action brings us into a harmony with that central control, in that we do not scatter our forces but work with the one force, or power, which is complete control. You always bring yourself into accord with that to which you have delegated power. That is, if you believe in the power of the world and its environment, you are seemingly receiving directive control from 1,000 different sources, and this is the source of your confusion. You do not know whether to obey the seeming demands made here, there, or some other place, and this division in the consciousness breaks down the entire structure of man's nature. He must know whom we have believed and become persuaded that he is able to keep that which we have committed unto him against that day. That one control does exist for every human, if he will but use it. Of course, the use of that control must be conscious. It must be consciously directed or used for the purpose which we decree or which we establish. It is through the establishment of that control that our thoughts are brought into that one power of action or one thought of expression. There they cannot help but express that which they send forth. In other words, the motivating principle we determine must come into existence. His servants are ye to whom you yield yourself servants to obey, and the manifest results must be determined by the outworking of that motivating force from which you receive your direction. The results can be no greater than is the power vested in the authority. This central control of the universe is often called principle as well as mind. Principle does not bind it as closely perhaps as the one mind. Still, that principle controls and governs, and it knows what it is doing. It governs with intelligence, so it must be a mind principle. The Hindu always put it as principle, or the Almighty, which means that man does become that mighty controlling element. Man stands in his almightiness the moment he projects his thought to that one control, that one central directive authority. It is also simple if one looks at the entire situation with an open-minded and sane approach to it. You say in your own mind that this person or that condition has power to make you sad. This is delegating authority to a definite location or form. Obeying the authority which you have thus assigned, you embody in yourself the mental and emotional state which you recognize as existing in the nature of that authority. You could not possibly think of embodying joy from a source that you decree has only the power to make you sad. Then, through your obedience to the authority you embody, the sadness which you have admitted it has power to manifest in you, and you say, I am sad. You become that which you embody. This is the whole secret power. But To manifest that mighty power that is ours, we must obey that source and embody the characteristics which it possesses. I am that, as the Hindus put it, when that becomes the thing we have embodied. This will all become perfectly clear to anyone who will dwell on the matter for a time. In this state, willpower is not a method of control. Willpower gives us the impetus for bringing that control into existence, but it is not the motivating factor back of the control. Will may differ entirely from control. Self-will never is able to project thoughts to one central point. Definite control or mind action is capable of carrying thoughts, feelings, or actions to one central control, which is a definite attribute or element that man uses always, in which he has dominion to work with, not over, but to work with. That is the very force which man brings into activity the moment he brings his thought to that focal point of principle which activates all conditions. Let us take a very simple illustration. Man has power to bring his mind into subjection to the principle of mathematics, but he does not have the will to make the principle act. The principle acts of itself and is a single center of control within its sphere. Man may bring his will up to the point of the activity of the principle, but from then on the principle is a motivating force, and through this subjection of his will, to be more accurate, he finds the secret of his mathematical power. The principle of the human will is that it is to be brought into subjectivity to some higher authority, and thus man becomes the embodiment of it, and is possessed of the power of this higher authority. Man's weakness is brought about through making himself subject to that which in reality has no power, and this should be proof to him of his immense power which is possible to him. He must now learn to apply this principle of his own will and recognize power as existing only in the one principle. Our everyday life is a concrete application of this fact, in that our statements conform to the one principle or one mind. We vision or project an ideal. Let us say that that ideal is for perfection. We immediately come into direct accord with the one mind control or principle. We project an ideal for ourselves to accomplish. If it is a high ideal, that power immediately becomes active and brings that ideal into existence. The moment that ideal is projected and the force back of it becomes active through it, that ideal is complete. That is, the moment the ideal is released from the activity of our will and is projected into the activity of the one principle, it is a completed thing. So long as there is any dual sense, it is difficult for anyone to see how this can be true on the manifest plane. The masters do not take into consideration any plane outside of the spiritual made manifest. If we do not take into consideration any plane outside of the spiritual, it must be in existence always after the statement is made, even before the statement is made. We quite evidently withhold from ourselves the accomplishment of our ideal because we look to three planes upon which it may manifest. It is found very conclusively today that it manifests only on one plane. It manifests on the spiritual plane always. It is always fact. Now, if we hold to and remain within that spiritual plane, we would see it in its true expression. We would not need to look to the material at all, for when we do, we speak in terms of materializations, and materialization is not spiritually a fact. The actual thing is the fact always. That is the spirit made manifest. 2 + 2 = 4 in the mathematical principle. It equals 4 in the mind, and likewise in manifestation. This is not three planes, but it is all the mathematical fact, separated or differentiated at no point whatever. After the manifestation, it is said that it does no harm to name it material or physical because you cannot harm the fact. But it is always elevated or exalted to the spiritual.